Hello, everyone. This is Philippa Benson, the managing editor of CABI Agriculture and Bioscience, CABI's open access multidisciplinary journal. Today, our webinar is about responding to rejection letters. All scientists get rejection letters at some point in their career, many times actually, from early career scientists all the way through very, very senior people. I hope this presentation will help you to get a better idea of what kinds of rejection letters are typically sent out from editors and give you some concrete strategies about how to respond to those rejection letters and move ahead quickly to take a next positive step towards getting your manuscript submitted and accepted at another journal. It's useful to start by reviewing the top reasons that manuscripts are rejected by editors. These reasons are true for all journals, regardless of the topic or type, whether they are broad, multidisciplinary journals or journals that are narrowly focused on a specific topic. It's true whether a journal is highly selective or if it takes a large portion of the science submitted to it. Regardless of the kind of journal it is, these are the top reasons that editors reject papers. Among them, first are that the science is not new. If the findings in the manuscript and the science being done has already been published elsewhere, editors will quickly reject the manuscript. If the science being represented in the manuscript does not fit the scope of the journal, no matter how good the science may be, editors will reject it. For example, if a journal explicitly states in its scope statement that its aim is to publish materials that will have broad implications for researchers in that area worldwide, editors are likely to reject a paper that is a case study with only local implications. Or if a journal says in its instructions to authors that it does not take methods papers or review articles, editors will immediately reject articles of those types, even if they're very good. Another reason that editors reject manuscripts is if they know that a paper is better suited to another journal. Again, this topic really has to do with scope. Editors know journals in their fields very well, and if they receive a manuscript that they think is a much better match with another journal, and that the findings will get to readers more directly through that journal, they may reject a manuscript for that reason in it also. Another reason that editors often reject papers, and a reason that authors really aren't too aware of, is that editors will reject papers if too many papers have been recently published about a hot topic in that particular journal. So this is an issue of timing. All journals want to publish a range of papers on a variety of topics within the scope of the journal. And if the publication has recently published a lot of papers on a certain topic, if a new one comes in on the same topic, even though it might be a good paper, editors may reject it because they want to leave room for other research on other topics. Of course, if a paper reflects scientifically flawed research or reflects some ethical problems in the research, editors will immediately reject papers for that reason when they see that that is the case. So these are some of the top reasons, the very top reasons that editors reject papers. Now, some of you in the audience may ask, what about if my English is not very good and my paper isn't all throughout grammatically correct. What about that? Well, let's look at the top reasons. The science is not new. That's not a language problem. The topic does not fit the journal. That's not a language problem. The paper is better suited to another journal. That's not a language problem. Too many papers have been recently published on that topic. Not a language problem. Or if there are scientific or ethical problems with the research, that's not a language problem. So the top reasons that editors reject papers have nothing to do with the quality of the English language writing in those manuscripts. So remember, manuscripts are rejected due to language or writing problems, most often when the writing is so bad that the editors cannot understand the content. If the content of a manuscript is solid, the science is new, it reflects sound science, it meets the scope and the criteria for the journal, and it is timely for the journal, editors will usually work with authors to improve the language. Good science will not be rejected by editors for poor writing alone. To avoid rejection, you should remember that what every editor wants is slightly different and tied to the specific journal that they're working for, but they also want the same thing. They want manuscripts that fit the requirements for the scope and the length and the type of article and other technical specifications for that specific journal. They want manuscripts that are correctly formatted in terms of the text and the figures and the table and the references. And they want to work with authors who understand ethical issues in research and publishing. If you are not familiar with the major guidance on ethics in research and publishing, I strongly suggest that you check out these three organizations: the Committee on Publication Ethics, the International Committee of Journal Editors, and the Center for Open Science. All these three organizations have extremely good explanations and guidance for global standards for ethics in both the conduct and the publishing of research. So to avoid rejection, make sure that you are making a good match for the manuscript that you're submitting in terms of its aims and scope, in terms of whether it is a broad multidisciplinary or a subject-specific journal. Make sure you're aware and match the standards for rigor and novelty for the journal. Make sure that you know the article types that the journal accepts, and go over in the instructions to authors all the initial submission requirements. If you make sure that your manuscript matches these, you'll avoid some of those major top reasons for initial rejection. Read the instructions to authors carefully. So when you are rejected, then what is the next step? Here are some concrete things that you can do. The first step after rejection is to read the letter carefully. Don't take the rejection or the comments personally. Take a step back and look in a calm, logical fashion at what the letter is actually saying. Make sure that you read it carefully and that you read between the lines. What is the editor telling you? Was the manuscript rejected without external review? That is called a desk reject. So either the first tier editor and a senior editor or a deputy editor, or at the next level down, an associate editor if they rejected the manuscript without sending it to external reviewers? Was the reject without external review? Did the letter specifically suggest that you submit to another journal? That means that the editors felt that your manuscript and their journal were not a good match. Did the editors indicate the possibility of a transfer? Many journals these days are published within a family of journal. I suspect, know about these. Nature has a whole huge family of journals. Cell has a whole huge family of journals. Frontiers has a family of journals. Some reject editors will suggest that the author may want to transfer to another journal within that family. Did the editors indicate the possibility of resubmission? Read the letter carefully. Some editors will say, if you change X, Y, or Z, we would encourage you to resubmit your manuscript. Maybe they want another set of data. Maybe they want another analysis. And this is feedback that you get from the editors before it's gone out for peer review. Do the editors suggest that you improve your underlying science or methods or materials? Read the letter carefully. If the paper was rejected following review, you've got to look at those review comments very carefully. Why was it rejected by the reviewers? If you're unsure why the manuscript was rejected, you can contact the journal to ask for more information. That is something that is perfectly acceptable to do if you're not clear. So the next steps after rejection are to talk over the situation with your colleagues and co-authors. Discuss the manuscript in detail. Go over the rejection letter carefully and look at reviewer comments very carefully if the paper was rejected after review. You should solicit ideas for other journals to submit to, and then study each of those options carefully to see what the best match might be. Read the instructions to authors. And get advice on what needs to be done to make your paper publishable from as many different sources as you can. Your colleagues, your co-authors, but perhaps other people as well. Get as much advice as you can for reshaping your paper. But do not take the same manuscript and directly submit it to another journal. You should review the manuscript and revise it according to the next journal that you select. No two journals are the same. So you have to tailor each submission to the specific journal that you are submitting to. So when you're ready to submit again, what should you do? You pick the next journal carefully. You study the instructions to authors. You use the comments or suggestions from a rejection letter to improve the paper, and you do that very systematically and carefully. You also have to make sure that you're revising your manuscript according to the requirements of the new target journal. That again means going back to step number one, read the instructions to authors carefully. You need to revise your cover letter to make sure that when you submit your manuscript to the new journal, that your cover letter is tailored towards that journal and includes the correct journal name. Do not resubmit to the same journal unless you're invited to do so. And if you're not sure if you've been invited or not, ask. When in doubt, ask. So after you have decided that you are going to revise your manuscript following review and submit to another journal, you should go back and look at the review comments and deal with them in a very systematic and careful way. Reread the reviews very carefully. Think of them as a roadmap for improving the paper. Don't think of them as criticism. Think of them as constructive advice that you can use to improve the chances that you have of getting into the next journal that you submit to. The reviewers usually make good points that you hadn't considered. And reviewer comments almost always can help you significantly improve a paper. You are responding to readers who see your manuscript through a different lens and a different light than you as an author have seen your manuscript. So when you are revising after rejection, organize the changes that you want to make and plan a strategy for the revision. So you might divide the comments into groups. They might look at global issues or local issues, but divide the comments up to make them systematic. Prioritize which comments and suggested revisions you're going to tackle first. If it's adding new data, if it's reorganizing things, prioritize from global to local. Make the big changes first and then the small ones. That's very sound advice, because if you are reorganizing things and you don't want to spend time revising sentences when those sentences are going to be potentially in a different part, in a different order of the manuscript. You could divide the changes based on different parts of the paper. That's another way you could organize those. And you should make sure when you're doing this that for yourself, you respond to each and every comment that reviewers made. Be able to defend changes that you don't want to make. Sometimes authors do not agree with every single suggestion that a reviewer may put forward or an editor may put forward. You do not necessarily have to make every change, but you should be able to defend why you don't want to make certain changes. And you should do this in a logical fashion using the data and the science and the logic of your argument rather than any element of emotion at all. There may be some changes that authors are asked to make that they can't make. For example, if a reviewer or an editor says you need more data from perhaps a field experiment, well, you are not always able to get back to the field. You may be asked to do another lab-based studies, and you may not have the materials necessary to do another set of studies. So just be aware that there are some changes that you may not be able to make, and you need to decide how to deal with that in the next version of your manuscript. If you need to improve the science, be very clear on what the reviewers are asking for. Do they want you to correct elements that they think were done in error? Do they want you to add more data? Do they want you to do additional analysis? Do they want you to alter or change how you articulate your interpretation of results? Do they want you to change your conclusions based on the data? Do they want you to pull back your claim? Do they want more explanation? Do they want a more balanced view? Or do they want you to add or delete certain parts of the paper? Again, look very carefully at the reviewer comments and respond and think through and respond to each and every one. Consider comments that you disagree with and look at the way that you articulated the ideas in your paper to see if it's the language that you used rather than the ideas. If the reviewers seem to misunderstand something, try explaining it in a different way rather than pushing back and saying, well, you just didn't understand what I said. Just sit down and rephrase it, rewrite it. Consider when you're revising, acknowledging the other point of view, the view that the reviewer brought up in comments, if that is the case. And make sure to explain your view in the context of the other view and explain why you want to hold to your view or your perspective. So if reviewers make comments that you don't agree with, deal with them. Don't dismiss them. If reviewers understood but disagreed with your point of view, you need to make a stronger case, perhaps add more evidence, perhaps restructure your argument or your text to make your point of view more clear, and also look for a compromise that will satisfy both sides. So again, acknowledge the other point of view without letting go of your perspective. Now, another thing that you can consider when you get a reject decision is to appeal the decision. Most journals do accept appeals, but make sure that if you are going to appeal, that the appeal is justified, and make sure that all your co-authors are on board with submitting an appeal. Look at the instructions to authors and then write to the editor or associate editor who handled your submission and tell them you want to appeal. Make your case politely, and you can phrase it as a rebuttal. And when you submit your appeal, start with a paragraph that outlines the specific issues that are leading you to appeal the reject decision. Deal with each one of the points that you have outlined one by one. And no matter what you do, never say that you think a reviewer was not too clever. Suggest a way forward that you and the editors and the reviewers can find a path to allowing a reconsideration of the reject decision. Look for a compromise. And remember that clear, rational reasoning in an appeal may prompt the editor to reconsider a reject decision. Based on my experience, I will tell you that most appeals fail. They take a lot of time and effort, and much more often than not, eventually appeals are denied. So again, think very, very carefully before you move ahead with appealing a reject decision. So always be polite and positive and concise, but also remember that there is a high probability that your appeal will be denied. So in summary, after you get a reject decision, take a moment and process what that means. Don't get upset, just take a breath. Read the rejection letter very carefully to get all the direct and indirect meanings. Discuss the manuscript and the rejection letter with your co-authors and decide collectively on next steps. If you want to appeal, do so very thoughtfully. Appeals take time and usually are denied. If you decide to submit to another journal, carefully study the options of the journals that you might submit to and select the best match. Then revise your manuscript systematically and thoroughly, guided by the useful comments in the rejection letter, and format your new manuscript according to the requirements of the new target journal and change your cover letter accordingly. Remember, every journal is different, and you need to read the instructions to authors carefully every time you are submitting a manuscript to a new journal. So follow these guidelines, and the next time, with a lot of hard work, you will have your manuscript accepted. Before we close today's presentation, I want to encourage you to visit CABI.org for information, publications, and education related to agriculture and biosciences. Specifically, I hope that you will visit CABI Agriculture and Bioscience, CABI's open access multidisciplinary journal. The journal is published in collaboration with BMC, Springer Nature's open access branch, and is led by an editorial board of top-ranking researchers from around the world. The journal is compliant with best practices in publishing for high-impact journals and is committed to publishing rigorously conducted science. We accept both primary and cross-disciplinary studies and those with broad global impacts, as well as studies that reflect more narrow, specific, and local applications. We are committed to thorough, fast, and fair peer review, and again, we're open access with links on both the BMC and CABI websites. I also encourage you to visit AgriArchive, CABI's preprint server. This is a free open access resource for unpublished preprint materials across all the agriculture and biosciences. It's hosted and managed by CABI, and there's no fee for submitting. Materials are posted within 72 hours after a quick review for appropriateness of topic, but the materials are not peer-reviewed, edited, or typeset in any way before being posted online. You'll also find CABI's author education and services portal on the AgriArchive website. Thank you all for listening to this webinar, and if you have any questions or comments, please send them to me at p.benson@cabi.org. Thanks very much. Bye.